Palmer, a founder of Punchbowl News, joined by my fellow founder, Jake Sherman, for a virtual conversation with Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins as part of our first 100 Days series. A big thank you to Start to Edelman, who has partnered with us for this entire series.
Our mission with these events is to bring you closer to the decision makers in Washington to understand how they are approaching Joe Biden's first 100 days and beyond. We're going to talk with Senator Collins about the most important political figures in Washington, about how the government can help stimulate the economy in the post-COVID world. We're going to keep a very close eye on the verdict, which we imagine in the George Floyd case, the Derek Chauvin case, which we imagine is going to be coming out any moment. We're going to try to keep an eye on that for you as well.
A quick reminder, you can tweet about the conversation on social media using the hashtag PunchbowlNews. And after our conversation with Senator Collins, we are going to be joined by Edelman's newly minted U.S. CEO, Lisa Ross, for a fireside chat. And with that, let's welcome Senator Collins to the conversation. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Anna and Jake. I'm delighted to join you.
Well, as Jake mentioned, the jury for the Derek Chauvin trial is expected to come out anytime during this conversation, so it seemed appropriate to start there this afternoon. I wanted to get your sense from what you've been following. Do you think he should be convicted?
You know, Anna, the judge yesterday, in response to some comments made by Congresswoman Waters, said that public officials should not be commenting on what they hope the verdict would be, whether they'd be disappointed in one verdict versus another. And I agree with the judge, and I'm going to honor what he said.
Fair enough. I want to follow up on that, though, because as you said, that's not necessarily your job to figure out what the facts are in that trial. But police violence has certainly been something that has been rampant and has been something this country, not just in Minnesota, but across the country. The Senate has considered, taking up bills on police reform in the past. Do you think there's any real chance this Congress that something substantive gets done on that issue?
I do. I told you I wasn't going to comment on the verdict, but I will say that I don't know how you could watch the video of what happened to George Floyd and not be horrified by it. I'm a supporter and indeed a co-sponsor of Senator Tim Scott's bill on police reform, which unfortunately and inexplicably was filibustered last year by the Democrats. That bill had a lot of good provisions on police training, on reporting misconduct, on having restrictions on federal funds unless a police department banned chokeholds. It was a good, comprehensive bill, and Senator Scott indicated his willingness to work with Democratic colleagues to amend it further, and instead it was blocked. We could have passed that and had it signed into law last year.
Yeah, I think that was that happened last summer during the Trump administration. I do wonder whether that's going to pick up steam again. I want to shift gears at least quickly here and talk about, you just won your election in 2020 by 9 points in what was an exceedingly expensive race for the state of Maine, the most expensive race of your career. Probably, I would imagine you would say your hardest fought contest in your career, and definitely one of the hardest fought of the cycle. What did you learn from that race that you didn't know going into it?
What I learned is how much your personal connections and hard work count in a state like Maine, where people know me. So even though you have this barrage of endless attack ads calling you corrupt and portraying you as you are not, that your opponents can go over the top. And then what I think happened in my race is there was a real backlash against all of the lies on television. And in the end, I think ironically, that helped me, that people knew that the person who was being portrayed in all of these attack ads was not the person who'd worked very hard for them for a very long time.
You served, you talked about kind of personal relationships. You served with Joe Biden in the Senate for more than a decade. We are 100 days in. What have you learned about his administration? And can you kind of read the tea leaves a little bit in terms of, you know, how he's using those relationships that he built over those decades to try to get his agenda passed?
Well, I have known President Biden for a very long time. Just a few years ago, when I got an Irish American of the Year award in the state of Maine, he was kind enough to do a great video congratulating me, and it was a very nice, warm gesture on his part. And that's the Joe Biden that I've known over the years. And we had a lot of adventures together, going to the Pope's funeral. I remember he sat next to me and talked to me the entire way back, which was something like an 8-hour flight. And I've always known him to be a warm, good-hearted person. I don't think, however, that he has lived up to his great inaugural speech in which he pledged to unify the country and work in a bipartisan way. Unfortunately, I think he's been tugged to the left by some members of his staff and outside groups, and I think that's unfortunate. And I hope he'll come back to a more bipartisan approach and work with those of us in the center on both sides of the aisle. That's the Joe Biden that I served with.
Yeah, you know, I got us thinking when we were preparing for this, Senator Collins, that you really kind of, I mean, you really are one of the biggest proponents of bipartisanship right now in this administration. I think you would view that you have a mandate for that from your election. You have a mandate. You have a lot of leeway to do business with the president. So let's look backward first, and then we'll look forward. The American Rescue Plan, which was a completely partisan piece of legislation, did not get any Democratic support. You went to the White House early on. You seemed to be knocking on the president's door, looking to work with him. Tell us what happened there.
Well, let me back up a little bit and first say that we managed during the Trump administration to pass 5 COVID relief bills, and every single one of them was bipartisan and got overwhelming votes. And I thought that's what would happen in this administration as well. But instead, what was proposed was this enormous spending bill, $1.9 trillion, on top of a $900 billion bill that we had just passed in late December. And a lot of the bill really didn't have much to do with COVID. We agreed on vaccines, on testing, for example, but there were provisions of the bill that really were not related to the pandemic. So I got together a group of 10 Republicans, including myself. We wrote a letter to the president. The president called me after he got that letter, within hours of receiving that letter. It was on a Sunday. My husband was actually driving me to the airport in Bangor, and we had to keep circling because I didn't want to tell the president, gee, I got to go. And but eventually I did have to say that so I could make my plane back to Washington. And he told me he would invite us to come to the White House the very next day. So it had a very good beginning. And what was supposed to be a 1-hour meeting turned into a 2-hour meeting. We organized ourselves so that each person talked about a piece of the plan that we presented, which started out as a $618 billion plan. We later increased it to $650 to take into account the fact that the president wanted even larger stimulus checks than we had included. And I left that 2-hour meeting very encouraged. Unfortunately, the very next day, Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, triggered the process that would lead to reconciliation and shut Republicans out of the process. So I think that was very unfortunate, and unfortunate that We didn't get a counteroffer from the White House, which I expected that we would. And and I was disappointed to hear the president say last week that we didn't move an inch, not an inch, when in fact we did move, and we indicated our willingness to negotiate further. So I think a bipartisan plan could have been achieved, but certainly not close to the $1.9 trillion figure.
When you look at that lessons that you learned kind of in that first negotiation, how do you view the chances for bipartisanship on this next massive plan, the American Jobs Plan?
I remain optimistic. I've long supported a robust infrastructure bill. We have great needs. If you look at traditional infrastructure, whether it's roads and bridges and seaports, airports, waterways, broadband, I would add to that list. We clearly need to make an investment. So I think it depends on there are three issues, really. One is the scope, whether we use a traditional definition of infrastructure or whether we use the new Biden administration discussion of infrastructure. Second's the top line. How expensive should it be? And third, how do we pay for it? Those are difficult issues, but I think if we have a focused bill that is focused on what most people would think is the common definition of infrastructure, and I would include broadband in that definition nowadays, as well as water treatment systems, in addition to the transportation infrastructure that we always talk about, we can achieve a bipartisan package.
Yeah, so you answered the question I was going to ask next, which is how do you see this bill coming together? Now, the most important issue that I think, and I think this is not getting, I think people are underestimating how big of the gap is right now on the pay for, on how to pay for this package. The president obviously wants to raise the corporate tax rate. You guys Republicans lowered it to a 21%. He wants to raise it to 28% to pay for this over 15 years. You weren't firm on 21% in 2017, if my memory serves me well. I guess, how do you think about how to pay for this package? And let me just add one more thing onto it. You're involved in discussions with your Republican colleagues right now about a package that Senator Shelley Moore Capito is putting together. Give us a sense of the scope and the size of that bill as well.
Well, I don't want to preempt Shelley's announcement, but she's been working very hard. I know you get all the scoops and wanted this one as well, but it will be substantially smaller than what the president is proposing. But you got to remember that an awful lot of what the president's calling infrastructure isn't really infrastructure. So you've got to separate out the president's plan, if you do traditional infrastructure, including broadband, is about $938 billion out of the $2.3 trillion. So that's the figure I think you should compare Shelley's package to. And I think that there are many Democrats who would like to see a way of paying for this package that would involve a variety of sources. It could be user fees in part, a slight increase in the corporate tax. I don't think anyone wants to see us go back to the days when we had the highest corporate tax rate in the world, or to impose huge new taxes on American families or on their retirement savings because they happen to be invested in stocks, which more than half of Americans own some stock. So this is going to be hard, but it's going to be a lot easier if we focus on a traditional infrastructure definition.
Could I just add one more question to the back end of that, Senator Collins? So you're saying around $1 trillion seems to be the sweet spot for many Republicans, I think you said. And do you support, where do you personally land on the corporate rate?
Well, first, let me say I'm not saying around $1 trillion.
Okay.
I'm saying that's it. If I misspoke, I apologize.
Okay.
That's what the president's package is. If you do the traditional infrastructure parts, it's about 938 or so $billion. If you don't put in all of the other provisions that aren't infrastructure. So that's the president's. I think the Republican package will be definitely smaller than that. I'm not sure how much smaller, but it will definitely be smaller than that. Your memory is very good. In 2017, I said I thought the corporate rate could be 22% or 23%. It didn't need to go to all the way to 21%. But there are other things we can look at. For example, the president's package actually spends more money on subsidies and charging stations and other provisions related to electric vehicles than on roads, bridges, waterways, seaports, and airports added together. So I don't think we need to do that huge of an investment in electric vehicles, but electric vehicles are free riders right now. They don't pay the gas tax. So one issue is for electric vehicles, should there be some sort of assessment or miles traveled tax or something so that they are helping to pay for the roads and bridges that these vehicles travel on. So that's something that you could look at, especially given the administration's enormous subsidies for electric vehicles.
We are quickly running out of time, so I'm going to pair two issues together, which is, you've talked a lot about bipartisanship, two thorny issues that have really been entrenched and the Congress has not figured out a way to move forward on, is guns, immigration. Do you think there is a bipartisan deal to be had on either of those issues, both of those issues? How optimistic are you that that could actually happen?
Well, first of all, on immigration, we have got to get control of the southern border. I was down there recently with a group of senators. I was shocked at the humanitarian crisis that I saw. And yes, it is a crisis. The number of little children, the number of very young mothers with children who had paid thousands of dollars to smugglers, the control that the cartels in Mexico have over who crosses the border. We have got to get control of the southern border. And we're at a 20-year high with the number of migrants coming in. So we've got a humanitarian crisis there, as well as a crisis for controlling our borders. And I think if you paired border security provisions with providing a pathway to citizenship for the dreamers, those are the young children who have been brought to this country over the years and have known really no other country, I think there's a possible deal to be had there. We tried such an agreement a couple of years ago and got more than 50 votes, but not 60 votes on the Senate floor. On guns, I don't want to trample on Second Amendment rights, but I think we could close some loopholes in the background checks so that if you have a private sale with someone you do not know who is not a family member, that it should go through a background check, similar to the proposals of Senator Manchin and Toomey a few years ago. I think that is a reasonable provision that would still guard the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding Americans. And I think if someone tries and lies to buy a gun and is stopped, that should be reported to local authorities. I think that's another common sense reform that we could have.
Senator, I'm going to also pair two things together because we're really quickly running out of time. Two kind of unrelated but somewhat related, and you'll see why I'm saying that. Rick Scott gave an award to President Trump on behalf of the NRSC, which surprised basically everybody who's been watching President Trump call Mitch McConnell all sorts of nasty names. George Bush former Republican president said, I want to get this right, that the party's turned isolationist and nativist. I think I'm curious just how you react to those two instances. I know you've had obviously many differences with President Trump, but I wonder how you react to those and how you think about those two things.
Well, first of all, the Republican Party needs to focus not on one individual. We have a lot of my colleagues in the Senate who are talented and interested in running for president. We have people outside of the Senate, such as Chris Christie and Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis and others who are interested. We'll have plenty of people who are interested in leading our party. But we need to return to the core Republican principles. We are the party of Lincoln. We're the party of individual freedom, of personal responsibility, of opportunity, of free markets, of strong national defense. And we need to return to those core principles. That's what unites us. There's no doubt that President Trump right now is the dominant personality, I would say, in politics today. Not just in the Republican Party, but there are plenty of people who are interested in being the next Republican candidate for president. And I love former George Bush. I should make that clear.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Collins. We really appreciate your time this afternoon and you're answering all of our questions. So with that, we'll let you go back and hopefully we'll all learn soon what the verdict is. Jake, do we have anything to report yet?
No news yet. No.
Okay. And with that, we are going to be joined by Lisa Ross, U.S. CEO of Edelman, for a fireside chat. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. First, we want to thank Edelman and you for your support of this series that first started out with White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain and included a powerful conversation with women of color on Capitol Hill, talking about the ways Washington has changed and what more needs to continue to be done. And we just capped it off with that incredible conversation with Senator Collins that touched everything from police reform to immigration to a lot about bipartisanship, the future of the country. And I also just want to congratulate you on your new role, your promotion as CEO of Edelman. So let's get to it. We've heard a lot there.
Sorry, I didn't know if you were ready for the round of applause, Anna, but that was an ad-lib situation.
I love it. I appreciate the round of applause. In case I forget to say it at the end of this has been a wonderful partnership. And the conversations have been interesting. They've been prolific. They've been provocative. They've been very honest. And I think that we are moving a path forward in terms of being able to have conversations about things that we might not always agree to. So kudos to you all for creating a forum and allowing us to partner with you. It's been a wonderful relationship. And thank you for the congratulations. I'm very excited to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's start with, first of all, we don't know what what is going to happen with this Chauvin trial. We're watching it very closely. I'm sure you are as well. Probably personally for clients and all kinds of things. Just wanted to put it out there if there's anything you want to say on that, or you're waiting until the actual trial we hear the final word on it.
I am literally on the edge of my seat, not just because I was asked to sit forward, but I literally am on the edge of my seat. And I think like all of America, like all of the world that is watching this killing of George Floyd prompted a movement. And I think as a nation, as painful as this year has been, that we are better off as a result of it. So I don't think there's any victors in this. And regardless of the outcome, I hope that all of us who have committed ourselves to eradicating inequity across the board, but particularly racial equity, will continue in the cause, because regardless of the outcome of this verdict, the issues are still there, the problems are still there, and they still need all of us to resolve to commit to it. So we'll see what happens.
What are you? So let's shift gears a little bit. And while we wait, and you see me looking at my phone, it's only because I'm looking for the verdict. So I'm not trying to be rude, and I did that during the Senator Collins part two. What do you hear from your clients on infrastructure? I mean, infrastructure is one of these rare topics, Lisa, that like it just touches everybody, right? I mean, everybody drives or walks or traverses roads in some way, shape, or form. I'm curious what you hear from your clients about infrastructure as a broad kind of proposition.
I think infrastructure is that issue that is fundamental to every problem that we talk about in this country, but I don't hear people talking about it as infrastructure. I think I hear people talking about it. Our clients say we have a problem here, but the solution is better infrastructure. They say we have a problem here, but the solution is better infrastructure. So it's almost, I would say that the concept of infrastructure almost needs a rebranding campaign, because infrastructure is at the root of everything that we are dealing with, but we're talking about it very topically, and we're not talking about it to the depth and to the degree that I would like for us to be. But if you peel the onion back, all of this is rooted in infrastructure. Almost all of it is rooted in infrastructure. And I hope that this administration and this Congress take it seriously and move it forward.
I like that. Maybe you have a new client, just rebranding infrastructure for Congress in Washington.
Man, that would be a
big one. Thank you, Anna. You read my mind.
I'm here for you. I do want to talk, though, because I thought one of the interesting things that I was reading about and preparing for this conversation, and we've talked a lot about, is kind of the annual trust barometer that Edelman puts forward in January. This year was its 21st trust barometer. And one of the things that I thought was, as we go into, to your point of kind of what is fact, what is fiction, how do we define things? But this year's headline, with more than 33,000 respondents in 28 countries, was declared the information bankruptcy. What does that mean? And what do you do when that's the results that you're finding from the questions you're asking?
So that's bad, right? Bankruptcy in any regard.
Sounds bad.
It's not something that we're working toward. Information is essential to everything that we do. So if we are bankrupt in information, then we know we have a problem. I don't think this is different or new to you all. Because, we look at the four institutions: media, government, business, and nonprofits. And throughout all of those entities, this concept of information bankruptcy, about people's information not being hygienic, it's not clean. And you hear it all the time, where people in really powerful positions are saying things that are not substantiated, that are not supported by fact, that are not supported by science, and in some cases are just simply not true. But because they have a platform, and because they are in a position, and most importantly, because they have an audience that wants to hear what they are saying. So they have an audience that is receptive to a message, irregardless of whether it's honest or not, or whether that it's true. And so we call it information bankruptcy. It's also malfeasance. I mean, it is absolutely malfeasance. And all of us, particularly you all in media, have a responsibility to clean your data, to make sure that it is clean, make sure that it is substantiated, make sure that it is real and honest before you share it. And my call to media is that you do that in hopes that others will take the lead. I have one other thing I really want to say, and I'm afraid you all may not ask me this question, so I'm going to ask myself this question. I have great respect for Susan Collins. I have always thought that Susan Collins was the type of politician that we could all follow, because she says what she means and she means what she says, even when it's not popular. And I've always hoped that the Gang of 8 would become the Gang of 18 and then of 80. And that the Congress that I grew up with, which had different points of view, but could work together to get something done, that she would lead in that. And in listening to her, she talked about the need for bipartisanship. She talked about the need to cross the aisles, but she didn't say anything that was nice about the other party. And she didn't, and it worried me. I have to tell you, there's so much going on right now. So for me to worry about this shouldn't be significant. But for the future of our country, it's important to me, and I think that others like Susan Collins recognize that in order to reach across the aisle, you have to have language that invites people to engage with you and to see different points of view. And I am not sure that I heard that in her narrative today.
I want to give her some props, actually, because I know there's a lot going on, and I do think she actually had some very kind words for Joe Biden, the president, and that he had done a speech for her, and that they have a kind of a long-standing relationship.
On a personal level, yes.
Yes, and I just think that's important, because we don't want to get into a back and forth, since she's not here to kind of respond to it either. So I just want to be pretty
and she's
careful
been
about
she's been relatively of all the people in the Senate, I'd say she's in the top 1% of people who are willing to strike a deal. I think politics today has gotten to a point where it's really tough, and the environment is just not, and it's not always what it needs to be, I'd say, is probably the best way to put it. I want to get to a couple more questions before
but to this point, she is the future of Congress. The way she thinks and her willingness to look at both sides of an issue and to work across the aisle, I think, are so incredibly, incredibly important. And I've always respected and supported her for that very reason.
The one of the interesting data points that you guys had is that businesses were trusted more, and I'm wondering, I mean, what are some lessons learned about that? And I think that we are, I think government has been put to the test, obviously, during COVID. And I guess I'd ask you, and I'll ad-lib a little bit here, but how do you compare the two entities right now, right? How do you compare government and business and the trust with the public based on what you've seen in your data?
They're like this.
Okay.
They're like this. And I think it is the most exciting time to be in business, because business has the capacity to drive change. And when we look at these issues, it is a matter of competency and integrity. And for the first time, business was seen in that axis of being competent and having the level of integrity and ethics to drive change. And because we are such activists now in everything that we do, and we are workers, our workplace has become our second home. Our employer has become our provider. The CEO has become the person that people believe and that they trust. And so the opportunity for business to lead is remarkable. And the opportunity for business to partner with the other three institutions, media, government, and nonprofits, is essential. And one of the things that we say to business, yes, you have the mantle right now, but you cannot go it alone. And you have to bring others with you. And that's where I think sort of tying in this concept of cleanliness of news, cleanliness of decision making, you do that better when you do it collectively and you bring other people into the conversation. And that is the request and the desire and the mandate for business right now.
All right, Lisa, unfortunately, we are all out of time, but thank you so much. And thank you to Edelman for the support in putting together this series. We want to thank Senator Susan Collins and her staff for coming on and talking with us ahead of what is going to be a very winding trip towards potentially an infrastructure package. Jake and I will be back Thursday morning at 9 a.m. for a pop-up conversation with Senator Dick Durbin, the Democrat of Illinois, focusing on immigration reform. And thanks to all of you for tuning into this, and hopefully we'll see you Thursday morning when you can join us again. Be safe and have a great night.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.